we don't have a cameraman, so
Oh.
I'm just gonna run that. It'll buff out.
I just start whenever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stand up and go.
Cool. Hi, I'm Elise, and today I will be affirming that marijuana should be legalized in the state of Texas for recreational use for those who are 21 and older, and our team will prove that this is a beneficial change. The framework for today's debate is the overall state benefit. The public policies in Texas should be judged based on their ability to improve not only economic growth, but also public safety. Starting off with our first contention is that it has economic benefits. Marijuana sales bring in large amounts of revenue benefiting the economy. Legalizing marijuana for recreational use for those who are 21 and older has already proven itself to be a powerful tool for the state economies by allowing the state governments to pour the revenue back into the needs of the state. According to the Marijuana Policy Project, states such as Washington and Colorado, which are two of the earliest states to legalize marijuana, have generated nearly $25 billion in state tax revenue from legal marijuana sales. The research highlights that states have generated a combined total of more than $24.7 million in tax revenue from legal adult use cannabis sales. And in 2024 alone, legalization states generated more than $4.4 billion in cannabis tax revenue. In another article by the Tax Foundation, they state it is estimated that the current size of the marijuana market nationally is $45 billion per year, approximately 0.28% of gross domestic product, and comprising some 26 million pounds of marijuana consumed per year. With 24 states having legalized marijuana for recreational use for those who are 21 and older, they have produced billions a year and it continues to grow. What makes such an important impact, however, is that money is put back into the communities. For example, the taxes provided from legal marijuana sales fund Medicaid, education, school construction, housing, roads, and many other things that benefit people. Next is the jobs that are provided. Through the legalization of marijuana for recreational use, many job opportunities have become available. According to a 2024 Cannabis Jobs Report by Banks, over 440,000 jobs have been generated in states with legal cannabis, a 5.4 increase from the previous year as cited by Harris-Lewowski. This steady growth illustrates that the marijuana industry is not just some temporary trend, but an expanding part of the economy. Moving on to my next part, which is public safety. Legal marijuana is significantly safer than illegal marijuana because it's operated in a regulated system. When the marijuana remains illegal, people turn to unregulated illegal sources, which can pose serious risks to people's health and safety. When marijuana is obtained through illegal methods, there is no telling if the weed is laced or contaminated. If marijuana were legalized, it would also be properly regulated. For example, in an article by Legal Clarity, California's law, Prop 226, keeps consumers healthy by screening for harmful pesticides, microbial contaminants, harmful metals, and solvents. By marijuana being strictly regulated and thoroughly tested, it ensures people are purchasing a product that meets health standards. Next is business accountability. Building on my previous point, legalizing marijuana for recreational use creates accountability for businesses. According to the National Library of Medicine, the legal marijuana businesses must follow strict regulations, as well as clearly labeling the product with the ingredients of the product potency, children's disclaimer, and an impairment disclaimer. By having clear labels, it can help individuals make informed and safer decisions. Next, cannabis is safer than alcohol. In the United States, there is a large amount of alcohol abuse, which leads to hundreds of thousands of deaths per year. However, as of now, there have been no reported deaths from an overdose of marijuana. Next is the legalization of marijuana allows for better research. Because marijuana is considered a controlled substance by the Drug Enforcement Administration, it imposes strict research laws. According to the National Library of Medicine, they state legalizing both whole cannabis and cannabinoid products would allow traditional research and drug development processes to occur and may indeed be the only possible way to quiet the allure of illicit markets. In conclusion, the evidence shows that legalizing marijuana for recreational use for those who are 21 and older is both an economic advantage and a public safety advantage. By generating billions in revenue, it creates hundreds of thousands of jobs, providing lots of funds to family, funding essential programs for schools and for the roads and construction, and improves public safety by replacing dangerous, unregulated markets which could be laced with a regulated, accountable system. Thank you.
All right, I have 2 minutes of cross-examination on the clock. Is everyone ready? get started on my first one. So first and foremost, I just wanted to say amazing speech. Obviously though, I do have a couple of questions. So first and foremost, when we're distributing economic opportunities, do you think we should be focusing on the ones who need it most, or should we be focusing on the ones who are at the top already?
The ones who need it.
Okay, I would agree with you. But then moving on past that, you say that we need to legalize marijuana to improve the testing and health benefits to that marijuana, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Does any of your research actually post-date the rescheduling of medical marijuana that happened this morning?
I did not.
Okay, cool. So then also on your last contention, which is about like business accountability, what is actually the benefit of more accountability in marijuana businesses?
Well, they care more about if their businesses are going to be shut down if they don't follow those.
Sure, but like why is that a good thing? Like why does that matter?
Because that way you know they're going to be thorough about what they're going through and they're not going to cut any corners because they don't want to be shut down.
Okay, so this contention is the same thing as your testing and health contention? They're the same thing?
Similar.
Okay, cool. And then I also want to talk about this example you bring up about how marijuana being legalized in California led to economic growth. Okay, do you know what communities that economic growth was concentrated into? Do you have like a mapping of where the economic growth was redistributed, or is this just like all of California went up?
They stated that it went back into the states.
Okay, went back into California.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then with my last 15 seconds, is this overall state benefit framework you propose just like utilitarianism, like the most good for the most amount of people?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Angel, and today I'll be negating the resolution resolved. The state of Texas should legalize recreational use of marijuana for adults aged 21 and older. Today, the negative team will prove alternative causes to affirmative harms and benefits to an alternative plan of decriminalization. Our first contention is decriminalization. Decriminalization of marijuana would do a better job at solving the harms than the affirmative. Of the SPO than the affirmative. According to Dokia 18, the U.S.'s punitive approach lives on. Black adults are still disproportionately likely to be arrested for marijuana-related offenses. Biden even acknowledged that arrests and convictions for cannabis use and possession have imposed needless barriers to employment, housing, and educational opportunities. Wholly descheduling the substance could be a real step toward addressing the harms of its criminalization. Decriminalization beats legalization in terms of reducing consumption and availability. According to Layman 2023, the actual act of prohibiting drugs plus some low-level enforcement yield relatively large reductions in consumption and associated harms while expending relatively few enforcement resources and generating relatively little waste in the legal market. Okay. The resulting businesses are highly inefficient and their products are scarcer than they would be if, for example, Amazon were allowed to sell meth. Legalization, by contrast, has led to an explosion in consumption and associated harms, including an estimated 50% increase in the size of the legal and legal markets combined. Contention 2 is monopolies. Vast inequities lead to unfair business practices in the marijuana sector. According to comm 2021, in 2017, 81% of marijuana business owners in the U.S. were white, 5.7% were Hispanic, 4.3% were black, and 2.4% were Asian. The lack of diversity in the industry is at least partly due to the lasting impact of the war on drugs. Cannabis legalization has destroyed rural farming communities in other states that try legalization. Cost of 2023. The number of people enrolled in the state's monthly food benefits program was 31% higher than the year before and more than 71% higher than the same period in 2019. That's nearly 3 times the rate of increase for the entire state. It's getting really bad, Ingham said. There are some of them who are in line at the food bank who used to be our donors. Thus, reject legalization to prevent the creation of big marijuana. Contention 3 is abolition efforts. Through legalizing marijuana, the affirmative serves to uphold racist institutions of policing. According to Snyder, Christie, Shanita, in 2024, when citizens do not agree with a particular rule of law, they are less likely to perceive law enforcement as legitimate. Because a combined 91% of U.S. adults believe that marijuana should be legalized for either medicinal or recreational use, the legalization of marijuana can improve police legitimacy. Legitimizing policing is harmful because policing is racist. According to statistics in 2024, they say, sadly, fatal police shootings in the United States seems to only be increasing. The rate of fatal police shootings among Black Americans was much higher than that for any other ethnicity. In conclusion, for these reasons, I urge a ballot in the negation.
Moving on to the cross-examination, you compared meth to weed when you said Amazon about Amazon selling meth.
Well, it's just to demonstrate big companies abusing like the drug industry.
Can you list some of the ways that they would abuse the drug industry?
Like what they do with our food. There's a lot of stuff that they can do with our drugs that we don't know about.
What about the
And
things
they're
that
not
are
as
laced?
honest with their labeling.
What about the things that are laced in illicit markets, but if they were put out by bigger markets, they wouldn't be laced because they would lose their license?
I think that wouldn't still stop people from producing illegal products.
And then you mentioned police racism and shootings. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, by allowing for the legalization of marijuana, you're allowing to create a space for police to send individuals to jail, take them out of society completely instead of considering emphasizing with individual circumstances and redirecting them.
You said it wouldn't stop people from producing, like the weed, but if it was produced by bigger people, wouldn't it reduce incidents happening?
No, I think it actually has a chance for there to be more harms. I think when they get in that position of power, they can take advantage of what they do with our products.
Even though it would be good at the end.
Yeah, I still stand firm on that.
That is all.
Okay, so going off of our first contention, marijuana sales, they bring a large amount of revenue into the economy. The Washington Post actually said that if cannabis was federally legal, then it would be an estimated industry mass of $3.8 billion in federal tax revenue. And they already saw this large amount in 2017 to 2025. And this money usually goes towards programs like the community that benefits those that are disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. So usually like lower income families and stuff. Another thing is that another way they benefit the economy is because they bring in jobs. So people that are, according to the Congress, the United States Congress, people that are in the marijuana industry, they belong to one of four categories, which is cultivators and producers. And those are people that grow and harvest recreational marijuana. They're also manufacturers and processors, and these are people that turn unprocessed marijuana into finished recreational products such as edibles. There's also people that are testers, and they conduct potency and contamination testing for retail marijuana businesses, as well as the retailers, which sell the recreational marijuana to the consumers. So in Kansas, the Federal Bank Reserve, they found that the emergence of recreational marijuana industry throughout the 10th Federal Reserve District had led to a stronger demand for commercial real estate as the recreational marijuana business purchased or rented industrial facilities that had otherwise been unoccupied. So it's not only benefiting other things, it's benefiting commercial real estate as well to benefit the economy. Because if people see that they saw that as well in Kansas, they saw that there was an increase in the overall employment growth rate and average housing rates. The higher housing rents imply that the residents place greater value in living in states that legalize marijuana, which capitalize the housing market in much the same way as other favorable amenities such as the ocean view, which results in the higher home prices. And going to our second contention, which is public safety. Regulating marijuana allows for safer products to be on the market. In states and communities where it's available, legal weed is probably more likely to be free of many contaminants like pesticides and mold because states are testing them and pulling them off of the shelves. And the people growing the marijuana plants, making the products and selling them illegally, want to keep their customers safe and stay in business. In California, when they legalized weed, there was more than 60 recalls in 2024, which included cannabis flower buds, pre-rolled marijuana cigarettes, edibles, and vape products. That's up from the 4 cannabis recalls the year before in the state. The business owners will be more than likely to follow the regulations of marijuana if legalized because they would not want to lose their business, as any business owner would not want to. Cannabis is also safer than alcohol. Approximately 178,000 people die each year in the United States due to alcohol abuse, and there's no deaths from overdose of marijuana that have been reported. So, yeah. Also, legalizing marijuana would allow for better research because as of now, marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance by the DEA, which imposes strict conditions on researchers researching in the area. So it would allow for better research to be done if we legalized it.
I know. Are you
Oh,
guys
yeah,
done?
sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're cross-examining now, so you're asking questions.
So you say that there has been no deaths due to marijuana, but has there been any deaths related to marijuana, like driving impairments from being high?
I'm sure there has been, but I don't think it matters whether it was legalized or not. People can drive high no matter what. Actually, there's been no testing that has shown that the rate has gone up from impaired driving in states that have legalized it.
So do you agree that people should be decriminalized for smoking weed, for being in possession of weed?
Yes, that would happen if we legalized it. The decriminalization of weed would come with legalization of weed.
That's okay. That's okay. All right. So I've got 5 minutes on the clock for the second negative constructive. Is everyone ready? All right, then I'll get started on my first part. Hi, so first off, I just want to give a quick introduction. My name is Aiden McQuarrie. I'm the second speaker on Team AAA. I will be following up Angel's speech, and then Ariana, in her next speech here in this neg block, is going to give you 3 reasons why you can feel comfortable voting neg at the end of today's round. But my job is a little bit more complicated than that. firstly, I'm going to be rebutting some of the stuff that the affirmative has been saying throughout the round and going on their case. And then secondly, I'm going to hop back over to the negatives case and explain why it still stands going forth in today's round. So first and foremost, let's start off with that affirmative case. All the way at the top at their framework where they said overall state benefit, and then in CX it got reclassified to utilitarianism. So the most good for the most amount of people. So when you're weighing impacts at the end of today's round, you need to keep in mind what saves the most lives, what has the best overall world in terms of good for the most amount of people going forward. But with that out of the way, let's hop into their contentions, starting with contention 1 of economic benefits, where they talk about how it will create $3.1.8 billion in tax revenue if we were to legalize. The negative has two answers to this. First and foremost is that lives outweigh money. In any sort of impact calculus, you're always going to put lives above money, which is why you're preferring the neg side, which has impacts that show actual lives being destroyed compared to the affirmative where we're just losing a couple of dollars in our wallet. But then secondly, they completely failed to respond to the argument that the negative made about marijuana monopolies that's coming out of the 1NC from my partner Angel that tells you about how in states where we have legalized marijuana, what we have seen is these large-scale farming operations destroying rural farming communities like COSAP talks about in 2023, where throughout California, we saw a 71% enrollment rate in their CalFresh benefits program after the legalization of marijuana. That's because the illicit market actually holds up several rural communities and people that are at the bottom, the people that we both agree need it most, compared to the world in the affirmative, which is measured in this black and whites. It's more money or less money. But the world in the negative tells you it's more nuanced than that. If we have more money overall, what it means is less money for the ones who need it most. And then on their second and third contention, which are all really about like testing and health, they even say it themselves in CX, that they're pretty much the same contention about how testing is actually going to be solved in the world of the affirmative, and we're going to see more regulation. However, as of this morning, that has become non-unique. Breaking, Trump declassifies marijuana to a Schedule 3 substance. This comes from Richer and Jean in 2026, from this morning at 11 a.m., where they report that Trump's acting attorney general on Thursday signed an order reclassifying state-licensed medical marijuana as a less dangerous drug, shifting licensed medical marijuana from Schedule 1 to the less strictly regulated Schedule 3. It also gives licensed medical marijuana operators a major tax break and eases some barriers to researching cannabis. So what this means is that the medical marijuana field is seeing some reclassification, which means there's going to be more testing, there's going to be more government insight into how to make cannabis safe, but Trump hasn't made it legally recreational at the end of the day. It still is this question today, and the decriminalization counterplan still stands because, again, we're talking about recreational marijuana use. But for all of their points about testing and about accountability, these are all solved through the medical marijuana rescheduling that happened this morning. Now, for my last 1 minute, I want to go back over to the negative case because, Judge, I think that the negative or that the affirmative has made a huge fumble in today's round by not responding to the negative case at all. Now, the framework that Dr. Lane gave us in class and the framework that's been laid out has been completely thrown out the window. There's been absolutely no constructive happening on the negative side of things. And I want to just make a quick reminder to everyone in the round, we are now entering the rebuttal period, which is for building up arguments that have already been constructed, not for constructing new arguments. That should have happened coming out of the 2AC. So the decriminalization counterplan, DOCA 18, tells you about how it's going to solve all the impacts better, about how we're going to have less traffic fatalities, we're going to have a better, more fair ground while still ensuring that these small rural farming communities are not destroyed. The contention too about monopolies, about how legalizing cannabis would destroy local farming towns and hurt the people at the bottom, goes completely conceded and is flowing through. And then the third contention about abolition efforts, about unfair policing, goes completely untalked about. You can vote on any of these issues at the end of today's debate. I now stand open for 2 minutes of cross-examination.
So you talked about how the DOCA 18 would solve all problems. Would you mind explaining what that is?
Yeah, so out of the first affirmative speech, we read this piece of evidence which comes from Dokia in 2018. It's an article from the Vera Institute of Justice in which they talk about how black adults are disproportionately likely to be arrested for marijuana-related offenses. And our last president, President Biden, acknowledged that descheduling marijuana and moving it from Schedule 3 would make a huge difference when it comes to actually destroying these barriers to marijuana use, and how it would ultimately lead to a more fair, more even playing ground without just full-on legalization.
Okay. And then you talk about the abolition issues.
Yeah, so the third contention, which went like completely uncontested coming out of the constructives, was about abolition efforts. It's about how legalizing marijuana ultimately leads to more racist policing because citizens view the policing as legitimate, which leads to that impact of more policing, which is, both sides I think can agree, a racist institution. We're saying that it is a disadvantage to the affirmative if their plan is passed through because it legitimizes police, because people ultimately want recreational marijuana to be legalized.
So if people want recreational marijuana to be legalized, then why aren't you guys wanting it to be legalized?
Well, I mean, there's multiple answers to that. One is that the decriminalization of marijuana should be preferred because it doesn't destroy those rural farming communities. It upholds better rule of law because we're going to see more fairness and all the benefits of the affirmative through the world of the negative. But then third, because it justifies policing, right, which we can both agree is a racist institution, which is ultimately upheld through the legalization of marijuana.
I have no more further questions.
Thank you. So now here we are.
Oh. Hi, I'm Ariana. I am part of the NEG, and I would like to say that we stand firm on why the state of Texas should decriminalize marijuana instead of legalize it. As my last two partners said, they said that it would help rural farming, and in a world where we want better for the people who need it most, wouldn't people who work and be the ones who benefit the most. They also made up the point of racist policing, which we all know that is true, that my partner Angel said earlier. And while the affirmative does have good points, it is more about economic benefits rather than the people who benefit from it. That's all. I'll hand it over to the affirmative.
Hi, my name is Ruby, and I will be speaking on behalf of rebuttal 1 for the affirmative side. The negatives had made some very interesting claims today, and I will be going over how I can support the affirmative side more. According to Berkeley law, a large opioid pharma company has donated $500,000 to oppose the legalization of weed in Arizona. In Colorado, they saw a drop in opioid use and deaths, which I would argue would be a very positive thing whenever we legalize weed altogether. According to Berkeley law, Washington generated $315 million between 2016 and 2017 in tax revenue, which went back into the community with school education and also helping alcohol and drug prevention. The criminalization of weed was rooted in racism in the first place in the 1920s, so we need to fix the problem of racism in police departments and the country as a whole before we think let's legalize weed to get rid of all the issues. This fear was started by a man named Harry Anslinger, and he was incredibly racist and falsely claimed that marijuana would turn people into psychopaths, murderers, and rapists. The negative also claimed that crash rates could increase, but according to Colorado State University, they saw no increase in crash rates whenever weed was legalized in the first place, and that article was published 10 years after the legalization of weed in Colorado. Excelsior staff has also stated that there could be a growth of jobs related in the marijuana industry by 250% in the next 10 years, which would help the American people significantly, especially in the drop of jobs that we have currently going on in the country. And also, monopolies are everywhere. This is a problem with capitalism, not weed itself. Approximately 90% of marijuana users will never experience marijuana use disorder, and if used safely, which would help if we legalized it, most people will not be harmed by weed. 57% of U.S. adults believe that marijuana should be legalized medically and recreational use. 32% that it should only be legalized for medical use. That makes 88% of all U.S. adults believing that we should legalize marijuana to the recreational and medical level. And those are all the, that is all the evidence that I have to support our affirmative side of the case.
So first off, disregard any arguments that they made on in that case, and it was not their time for constructing, it was time for rebuttal. And to conclude, I still stand firm on my stance with the negative team for the many reasons that I brought up, including decriminalization, monopolies being formed, and abolition, in which they did not respond to any of those concerns. And as our team has said earlier, it's been shown that the people love marijuana, and by allowing for legalization, this creates a misconception to the people that the police actually value and care about what they want, which is not true. The police do not care about us, and it has been shown through many unnecessary killings that they are doing more harm to our societies. And yeah, the other team did not make any response to any of that mention of abolition, and they did not make any response to the rescheduling of marijuana that we mentioned earlier. And I just want to say that we need a system that considers empathizing again with circumstances of individuals instead of removing them from societies and being discriminatory. So yes, I stand firm on with my team.
I'm Michaela, and I'll be doing the second rebuttal. In conclusion, our argument is better. Keeping marijuana illegal doesn't make the problem disappear, it makes it more dangerous. And making it illegal will introduce it to regulations and testing to stop people from using it in a dangerous way. Making marijuana legal also allows for us to be able to test for things like mold and pesticides, which also allows for weed to be checked and controlled. When it's obtained illegally, no one can tell what's actually in it, which is more harmful if it stays illegal because now people don't care where they get it from or what's in it. After the recalls, it should have been a big sign that it should be legal so that it can get tested safely like it was in the state and distributed with more caution. It's also a big contradiction to focus on a less harmful substance like marijuana when alcohol is a much bigger problem, and it is legalized. Like they said, 178,000 deaths from alcohol is a lot more than 0 deaths from weed. Also, it's hard to study because it is illegal. We would be able to study marijuana better if it was legal, allowing for us to come up with safer ways and laws to regulate it. It also leads to fewer arrests, allowing police officers to focus on more serious crimes. The legalization of marijuana can also help with the progress of medicine and science, and being able to study it could reveal things that they don't know about. It also allows the state to pour back tax revenue into the state. $3.1 million is a lot of money put back into a state.
else to even be able to reach crops, but.
Yeah.
We're packed in, but
Yeah.
we're
It's like a sardine can.
So I got this